kids do love the anime. My 3-year fight with a Neckbeard anime club, part 1. Did you win? Okay, so I recently discovered this subreddit and was amazed to see so many people had similar experiences with these types of people. I'm relatively new to Reddit, and this is my first post, also on mobile, so feedback is appreciated. But anyways, this is a story about
all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down.
About how my friends and I basically had to deal with a Neckbeard anime club for most of our high school life. Please know that this is a long story and will most likely involve multiple parts if it is continued. First of all, well, a bit of context is required. At the time, I was in my sophomore year of high school, approximately 16 or 17, and I was taking Japanese as a language credit and was the treasurer of the Japanese club. My great-grandfather was Japanese, and ever since I was 10, I had a great interest in the language and the culture despite being predominantly Mexican. Anyway, as part of the Japanese club, members were required to sell Japanese snacks and candy, Pocky, Haichu, Hello Panda, etc. during the week in order to make money for the club. Is it Haichu boot? No, that's Chew High. I think Haichu is those chewy candies. They delicious. Just a little confused. At the time, the president and vice president of the club, who will be P and VP, were friends of mine, and the three of us functioned as the model vendors for the rest of the members in the club. As model vendors, we had to make rounds all over the school almost all week and sell as much as possible to encourage the members to participate. And out of all the places in the school where we made the most profit, it was, you guessed it, the anime club. I mean, maybe just be a good ambassador if you can, and then you'll be rolling in money in no time, right? Weebs got money. Weebs got money. Now, I don't want to be biased either. I'm a huge anime fan, and I've loved anime for a long time now. However, I never try to make it the center of a conversation and simply consider it a kind of hobby of mine, alongside sports and video games. But these guys were on a whole other level. The anime club gathered almost every day in the most remote and dark corner of the library. And every time we walked in, it was freaking terrifying. We sold after school, so the library was mostly empty, besides some clerks and students, meaning most of the lights were off, and the computers as well. So imagine, as you're walking into the depths of the library, just how scary it must be to come across a table of 20+ neckbeards staring with dead fish eyes at an animated girl on a giant projector screen. And then all of them turn their flashlight eyes towards you and just open their mouth and the sound of radio static comes out. Yeah, I think I had a nightmare like this once. Now, these guys were friggin' neckbeards to a T. I mean, they rocked the whole set. Fedora, trench coat, fingerless gloves, sandals, khakis, you name it. They had it on no matter the season. And on top of that, they smelled really, really bad. Every time we walked in, we literally had to brace ourselves for how bad this smell was gonna be. Some of these guys were notorious for not showering for weeks, and one was even famous for stating that, quote, daily showers are a construct for water companies to make more money. And he refused to shower, despite having faced serious health conditions due to it. Jesus, man. First part of that sentence, hilarious. Second part of that sentence, really sad. Anyway, sweat, fast food, grease from clothes that were a month unwashed is not a smell that you want to experience. Yet, in we had to go because it was good money. Yeah, but how good is the money though? Overcoming the smell, being in the mere presence of these guys, was extremely unsettling. The club consisted of both overweight and bone-skinny neckbeards, mostly wearing or carrying some sort of anime merch on them, mostly NSF or borderline hentai. Despite already having various issues with school security on the stuff that they brought, Now, keep in mind that the vice president is a female and also an anime fan, but to a much lesser degree. And somehow the anime club was aware of that. Well, she gets a pass because she's a female. That's why we had to elect her to VP. It's just good representation. And maybe she'll bone one of us someday. It's never gonna happen. So when she shows up among most of them, it is like friggin' World War Z. See, I called this one out. All their eyes immediately swivel towards her, and a swarm unlike any other that I've seen forms around her to try and entice her, with guys greeting her with, "You look beautiful today, my fair maiden." God. And such lines to the point that it almost seems completely unreal. If only. However, since I'm the one with the snacks in hand, I always had to stand in front of her to keep back these guys and avoid the unwanted touching, which has happened to her and other members of our club before, as president begins to take requests. Unwanted touch? Dude, like, no amount of money is worth that. You need to get up and out, OP. At this point, I feel like I should make it clear that some of the guys in this club were notorious figures at my school, being detained for bringing weapons or harassment or other violent acts, meaning that they were no strangers to conflict and being talked down upon by authorities and teachers. But this is a long story, and I don't want to feel like I'm wasting people's time before going into more detail, so if you guys want to hear more about how a simple club interaction turned into a 3-year conflict involving fights, police, the school board, and a potential shooting, well, let me know so I can make a part 2. Thanks for reading. This is one of the highest rated posts on r/NeckbeardStories, so it did get a second, third, and fourth part, but really this first part kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, you know? It's like, I don't want to waste people's time. It's like, no, you don't want to waste your time unless this gains some traction. I see what's going on. I understand why you do it, but just, you know, call it like it is. With an outro like that, teasing that stuff, man, I am super glad that the OP came back and delivered. So let's get into part 2 right now. My 3-year fight with a neckbeard anime club, part 2. Apparently you guys were really intrigued about the first part of my story, so I'll tell you guys the rest of what I like to call the best and worst experience of my life. Thanks again for reading, and for those new to this story, please read the first part for more context. Anyways, on with the story. As I stated in the prior part of this story, my club and I were no newcomers to the members of the anime club, and basically we had set up our own protocol when selling in their area. What I like to call the first stage of this story began on a Friday, around April, near the end of my sophomore year, when school was beginning to settle down. At this point in time, going to the club had become more a routine that neither of us liked to repeat, but it gave us the most income because these guys would literally buy anything with a Japanese character on it, even if it wasn't good. They don't know what's good. They like what's sold to them, that's all. However, this day was a little bit different as things didn't go as they usually did. On that day, we headed to the club following our usual routine, with President and me entering first, with Vice President behind us in a sort of triangle formation. I just love the visual here, holding back the beardy hordes. Yet, as we walked into the dark, putrid-smelling corner, we were surprised when waiting for us was a neckbeard that we had never seen before. This guy was around 6'2", skinny as hell, super long, greasy hair covering his shoulders, patchy beard with that weird Michael Cera mustache, and wearing one of the most ridiculous set of clothes I've ever seen in my life. This guy was standing there, looking at us wearing not a trench coat, but a full coat from the main protagonist of an anime called Sword Art Online named Kirito. Knee-high black military boots with tucked pants, fingerless gloves, an old, stained, stretched-out shirt, and of course, a fedora. Wow, he really did his research. He's got the entire ensemble. I am in awe at the amount of power this man is exuding right now.
Gosh, he must get all of my ladies.
Now, to keep things relevant, I'll name this dude Kirito, but anyways, as soon as we arrive, not only is he standing there, but next to him is an obese neckbeard wearing a Hatsune Miku t-shirt that clearly doesn't fit him because his belly button was sticking out, stained Nike shorts, and sandals with stained white socks. I will name this guy, Porky, since he made really weird grunting noises constantly. Quite a pair they make, but if they get into a fight, my money's on Kirito, calling it now. At first, I looked at President, and we tried to make nothing of it, thinking that there's some freshmen maybe who are new to the club, and we try to act professional as we introduce ourselves. Immediately, as I begin to speak, Kirito points at me and says, "We know who you are!" with that classic high-pitched white kid voice. Haha, how true, OP. White people do all have the same voice. High five. At this point, me and President are looking at each other, confused as hell, trying to figure out what's going on. Both of us tired and wanting to go home after a long Friday, so I try to be as forward as possible with this kid and simply ask him if he wants to buy something. Again, immediately after, he launches forward and swats the box I'm holding with the snacks to the floor, saying, and I quote, "You fake Japanese wannabes don't belong here! Go sell your fake crap somewhere else!" Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the weebiest of them all? At this point, I could see that President is visibly mad and begins to call this dude out for what he's done. I pick up the box and tell him to calm down because I wanted to avoid a fight, knowing that it would go nowhere. I try to keep President calm and he settles down, and then I confront Kirito myself. I tell him as calmly as I can that there was no reason to do that, and that he doesn't have to be disrespectful as no one was talking to him to begin with. Without skipping a beat, this 6-foot-tall twig walks to my face trying to act menacing and tells me to go be a somewhere else. This is already too ridiculous. OP admitted that this is like pure capitalism, so maybe now Kirito's trying to step up and hold down the Japanese snack market. How much money are we talking here? It's gotta be a lot. At least like $50, $60, right? At this point, I want to clarify that I myself am not very tall, averaging around 5'7". However, I used to be in competitive boxing and go to the gym regularly, so I'm not exactly weak either. So as this guy's staring me down in front of my friends, I try to remain as civil and calm as possible because I want to avoid a fight at all costs, knowing very well that if I hit this guy, it'll hurt him worse than he thinks. OP is so tough, my god. However, I will give him credit for trying to avoid the fight. So eventually, Vice President steps in saying she'll report him and the anime club if he keeps pushing, to which Kirito responds, "Know your place," and pushes her to the ground as Porky begins to laugh. At that point, I break for a bit, grabbed his saggy shirt, and slammed him against one of the nearest bookcases. All the other neckbeards that had been silently watching immediately stood up, and President and Vice President pulled me back as fast as they could. I don't tolerate any kind of unnecessary violence, and especially against a girl. I put him down and gave him a stern warning telling him to never mess with us again. And we decided to leave without selling anything. Yeah, you probably that's it, right? Bridge is burnt. Why would you want to sell them stuff anyways? You could tell that Kirito did not expect that and was visibly shaken as Porky stood there staring at him. I mean, I don't even know what to tell you at this point, bro. You f around, you find out. That's how the equation goes. So the same day, I report to our club advisor, who was also my Japanese teacher, and explain the situation. After that day, we agreed to stop selling to the anime club for some time, and I personally went to the student council, who handled all student affairs, to file a complaint. Stop selling candy for some time. Sounds like a cop-out, bro. Anyways, after that day, the anime club became famous as some student had gotten word of what happened, and it ended up in the school newspaper. This was good and bad for us because it would show the true nature of the anime club, but it would also put our names out into the school. Well, eventually the worst came to happen, and President was beginning to get threats from random neckbeards around the school. Uh-oh. At first he ignored them, then it spread to Vice President and eventually to me. There would be times that I would be walking after school, and a group of neckbeards would call me out as, "That filthy wannabe Japanese." This didn't really bother me, as I wasn't really feeling threatened since most of these guys looked as if they either couldn't run 10 feet or couldn't lift 5 pounds. I was gonna say it seemed like a one-off incident, but I don't know. Seems like one bad apple is spoiling the bunch here. The real problem began when apparently one of the neckbeards overheard that President was actually gay, and the harassment began. After the incident, I had rarely seen Kirito and Porky, and when I did see them, they were always together and wearing those same clothes that they always wore. However, now Kirito felt that he had to take revenge on the Japanese club, so he apparently harassed President for almost 3 weeks, calling him not very nice names and even physically pushing him at times, all with Porky helping him. It reached the point where VP and I had had enough, so we took it to the principal, who had already heard enough complaints about the club, and told us that she would personally speak with the advisor of said club. After a few days passed, we heard some rumors that the anime club was going to be disbanded, as a bunch of members had already been kicked out. However, no word about Kirito or Porky was heard. It later turned out that the club had been suspended for a week, and then was back in operation. At this point, the second stage of the story began. However, I feel like this is pretty good for a part 2, so let me know if you want to hear more, and I would be glad to post part 3. Thanks for reading. I really don't see why this had to become a big thing. I understand you want to sell candy for your club or whatnot, but there's got to be easier ways to get some money, you know? It seems like there was a truce for some time, but yeah, the truce is over now. And it's time to avoid the anime club 100%. At least that's the way I see it, but I don't know. High school's crazy. You get the hormones going and you can't let nobody punk you. You gotta go show them what for. I sort of get it, but it still doesn't feel too great. Looking from the outside, I'm like, yeah, that's a mess. You gotta pull yourself out of there as fast as possible, which I guess we'll see if that happens in part number 3 right now. My 3-year fight with a neckbeard anime club, part number 3. Again, I just want to give a big thanks on the overwhelming support that this story is getting. I'm glad to see people are interested, and I'm more than happy to share this experience with y'all. If you're new to this story, please make sure to check out the previous parts for context, and I just want to make a quick note in that I know this story might seem too good to be true, but I guarantee you that people like this do exist, and that this story did happen as it involved not only me, but many of my close friends. I don't want to try and lie or fool anyone, so I admit I do exaggerate some things in this story, but by no means does that mean that it isn't credible. Anyways, on to the story. Honestly, it seems like no matter what you post, somebody's gonna call it fake, so you don't need to explain yourself in the first paragraph, but I appreciate you. So, as we left off in the previous part of this story, the anime club had been suspended, but was now back in operation after some serious warnings were issued. At this point of the story, what I like to call stage 2 began in earnest, along with the beginning of my junior year of high school. At this point in my high school career, I was still in the Japanese club along with president and vice president, but our club policy had been dramatically changed. Due to the prior incident, selling was no longer enforced, but was encouraged for extra credit and was only allowed for sophomores and above. Wait, the selling was enforced in the previous parts? I missed that. This sounds like the pits of hell. Forget it. After serious deliberation, we agreed to once again sell to the anime club now that we assumed they had learned their lesson. Mistake. However, I wanted to be the first to sell again because at the time I felt guilty for what happened, and I wanted to make amends with Kirito and the club. I just don't know if it's a good look, OP. Unlike last time, this time President and I were the only ones who went, as we didn't want to get Vice President involved if things got dirty. Once again, heading into the library brought back chills, as at this time it had been almost a month since we had last sold there. Yet, as we walked to the dark corner of the library, we were surprised when the infamous pungent odor of the club members didn't hit us as hard as before. And that's when we realized that it was because the members were no longer there. Oh good, some problems solved themselves. The 20 plus members that previously composed the club were no longer there, and now only about 7 remained, still including Kirito and his coat, as well as Porky. When we heard the club had faced serious repercussions, we never imagined that they could have been this severe. Immediately after we walked in, Kirito was the first one to stand, as he and I made eye contact for the first time in almost a month. Oh, that's a tense moment. Let's just soak it in for a minute. At first, he didn't say anything, as he and the rest of the anime club just stared at us blankly, as if we were some kind of ghost, until he finally let out a raspy, "What do you want?" I told him I came to apologize for what had happened, and that the Japanese club was willing to sell to the anime club once again. As soon as they heard this news, some of the neckbeards watching from the tables jumped up and ran to get some of the snacks that they had been long deprived of, some even asking for Vice President. Kirito, however, just sat back down with Porky at his side, clearly not wanting anything to do with us. P and I expected this to happen, so we had devised a sort of plan that would help both parties. I mean, the apology's cool, but if he doesn't want to buy, he doesn't want to buy. Why does there need to be a plan involved? You burnt that bridge. It's over. Move on. Every year, around the beginning of the new semester, our school held a week-long pep rally to welcome new students and promote school spirit, holding all kinds of events during lunchtime and after school. Again, this sounds like the depths of hell to me. One of these events was a Super Smash Bros. Tourney that was held in one of the bigger buildings of the school, and the winner would get a $25 Applebee's gift card. That's pretty legit. Which Super Smash Brothers, though? I only play Melee and Ultimate. Please, thanks. This year, however, we, as the Japanese club, wanted to clear our name and lay to rest the tension and the rumors surrounding our club and the anime club. So we planned to hold a club clash between the Japanese club and the anime club through the Super Smash Bros. Event, where we would sell food and drinks while people watched us go at it on a big projector screen. Little did I know that this would be the catalyst to one of the biggest problems this school has ever faced. Once we finished selling and collecting the money, we informed the anime club of our proposition, towards which Kirito and all of the members clearly drew interest. Then Kirito stood up immediately and challenged me to a 1v1, saying something along the lines of, "I'll make you pay for what you did." Yeah, I guess. Can't handle him in real life. Might as well try and handle him in Super Smash Bros. Happy, in a weird way, we gave the good news to our advisor and spent the next few weeks completing paperwork and setting up for the big event. Fast forward to the day of said event, and sure enough, a huge amount of people showed up to see the two quote-unquote anime clubs compete. Keep in mind, people confused us for an anime club very frequently. Okay, but to be fair, you could kind of see where they got that notion, right? My team and I showed up relatively early, since we had to set up the game system and the game, and just when we were beginning to doubt if the anime club was ever going to show up, sure enough, in comes Kirito with his squad of neckbeards, rocking a style even more ridiculous than the first was. In walks Kirito, still wearing the cloak, but now wearing a new pair of knee-high boots with the most buckles I have ever seen on a goddamn shoe. See a leprechaun or something? Pairing them with tucked-in military pants, a new pair of fingerless gloves, a black button-up shirt with a black tie, and now instead of a fedora, he was wearing a black headband and commando military paint under his eyes. Needless to say, he stood out amongst all of us. Bro, I can't imagine somebody actually dressing like this. The first outfit, I buy it. This one, no. It's way too over the top. But it does feel nice that OP's embellished it for our entertainment, so I'm gonna roll with it, I guess. The tournament was set up in that every match would be a 1v1, with each person having 2 lives and no time limit or items until the final 2 remained. Since we were the ones who organized the roster, placing Kirito against myself was no problem, although we were like the 5th ones to actually go at it. As of this point, everything was going well, and no problems showed up, with minor fits of rage and a bit of name-calling being the only noticeable issues. That is, until it came to me and Kirito. I wouldn't call myself a Smash Bros. God, but I definitely had enough skill to play the game, and frankly, so did Kirito. So the match was actually fairly exciting, coming down to both of us having 1 life. Now at this point, Kirito hadn't said a single thing throughout the match, and was dead focused on the screen, and only began throwing insults and swears when the match got even, and he realized that this wasn't going to be the cakewalk that he expected. And then, it happened. I beat Kirito due to a small mistake on his part, and I was about to turn and shake his hand when the most horrifying and blood-curdling scream I have ever heard came from his lungs, as he threw the controller, which was not his, and kicked a nearby table holding food before throwing his headband and running out of the building in tears. Jesus. He's a bit of a sore loser, isn't he? After that, the whole building went silent, and the tournament was canceled since Kirito broke one of the only controllers that we had. Oh my god, what a tragedy! Now how are we gonna find out who's the best at video games? Up to this point in my life, I have never seen a tantrum such as his from any kid or adult, and frankly, I'd like to never experience that again. But this point in time is the climax of this story, as this is what triggered a 2-year grudge in Kirito that brought upon stage 3 of this story, and the most violent episode of this story, involving the remaining members of the anime club and the outsiders who were not involved in the existing conflicts, into potentially deadly circumstances involving the police. Jesus. I'm sorry if this story feels dragged out, but since this happened over the span of 3 years, there's a lot of information, and I don't want to make an excessively long post that drags on, so if you guys really want to hear the end of this story, let me know, and part 4 will most likely be the final chapter of this story. Thanks for reading. Well, I can't just not read the final part now that he's mentioned the police getting involved and all this stuff. It sounds like things are really starting to heat up, so let's go ahead and see how this story devolves in the final part, part number 4, right now. My 3-year fight with a neckbeard anime club, part 4, final. As promised, here's the final part of my story. Sorry it took so long, but this is the final part, and it will be a bit longer than usual since I'm trying to fit all the remaining part of the story into just this one post. Thanks to all the people taking the time to read up to this point, and thanks for the support on continuing this story up until this point. Without further chit-chat, here is the rest of my story. I don't know why the intro-outro blurbs are always so clunky. Just tell the story, it's fine. After the events of the Super Smash Bros. Competition, relations between the anime club and the Japanese club became worse than before. Kirito's outburst made a laughingstock of the anime club and left a bad name for all of its members, making the hate towards us even more prevalent. Because people still can't tell the difference, I guess. For the rest of my junior year, Kirito had formed an almost psychotic grudge against the anime club and anyone related to it. What I say about those hormones, it is crazy. To this day, I believe that this guy had to have had some sort of mental illness or anger problem, because the amount of hate and violence that emanated from him for the rest of our high school career was almost unreal. OP said anger problem. Yeah, dude, he pitched a controller across the room. That is significant. And now you have to deal with the fallout of this basically nothing burger. Who cares? You lost at Super Smash Bros. Move on with your life. Oh, but you can't talk sense into people like this. As I mentioned before, the members of the anime club were no mysterious characters. Most of these guys were famous for their questionable antics, ranging from a group of them almost forcing themselves onto a freshman girl, claiming they were
simply trying to be nice.
oh God, to being detained for bringing knives, airsoft weapons, and even real weapons onto school grounds. Where is this place? The final circle of hell, I guess, as I theorized a couple times before already. So a few weeks after the event, the members of the anime club began to be seen more often, hanging around the school in a massive group, which was weird, as usually these guys were hardly ever seen together besides in their club. The first case that brought this group into the spotlight involved younger members of our group who had worked to set up the tournament. The first report came when during one of our meetings, one of the members told us that he had been threatened by a group of people that he didn't know. When asked to describe these people, it became obvious that the anime club was at fault. However, we didn't expect the threat to be as serious as to involve this member's life. Dude, this is really getting out of control fast, isn't it? It starts with like a little scuffle in the library and now somebody's life is hanging in the balance? Christ. Apparently, these guys told the kid to
Quit the Japanese club, or his days would be counted.
hinting that they had intentions to hurt him. Okay, but they didn't actually threaten him. All right, I feel better now. Tired of the non-stop problems that these guys had brought us, we wasted no time and informed the school's security department. We were assured that they would take these matters into their own hands,
And that there was nothing for us to worry about.
ah boy, were we wrong. The second case was far more personal, as it involved some of Vice President's friends who were by no means associated with our club at all. As I had previously mentioned, Vice President was known by some members of the anime club, and she even shared some classes with some of them. This case happened when the members that shared the class noticed that she was acquainted with some other people of that class and decided to take action to coerce VP to quit the anime club. You mean the Japanese club, right? See, even OP's getting them mixed up. After school, Vice President's friends were apparently followed by a group of members and later pushed around, with one of them again making a threat on his well-being. Wasn't the VP a girl earlier? Like, I remember that very specifically. This whole story's falling apart in the last bit, which is great. However, the situation changed when the person being threatened decided he wasn't having any of it, and he hit the neckbeard who was harassing him. Unfortunately, I never got more info on this case besides the knowledge that the fight did escalate, resulting in a member of the anime club getting a broken nose.
Whoa, pretty hardcore, bro.
The series of fights carried on throughout the week until President's friends got involved. During lunchtime, we were allowed to go outside campus to eat, as we had restaurants nearby that held specials for students. During this time frame, security was very loose, as people with cars could drive to further restaurants than were outside of campus rule. Taking advantage of this, Kirito and some of his friends decided it would be funny to follow P and his friends, who were also gay, to a nearby McDonald's where they wrote "Weeder lovers" and other crude messages on his car with spray paint. That is ludicrous. At this point, our tolerance had run out, and school security had done nothing about the problems, so we took it to a nearby police station, where we were told that Kirito and his group would be put under investigation. And by that, they mean we filed a report. I don't know what else you want us to do. Police were always present at campus during the day. However, their reason for being there was never disclosed, as they wanted to make sure Kirito and his pals didn't play the good little boys despite their previous crimes. A few weeks passed, and the presence of the police considerably diminished the attacks until the big day came that sealed the anime club's fate forever. You mean to tell me they actually spared some cops to go hang out on a high school campus? All right, bro. Again, around the end of my junior year, school began to calm down, and now that sales were not enforced, I was able to go home at our normal time rather than late after school. I didn't have a car in high school, so I took the bus home, which was always a half-hour wait because it had other stops as well. It's a bus, you know. Our bus stop was relatively big and always had hundreds of kids waiting to go home, as buses would pass one by one with their allotted stops. During one of these days, I was waiting for the bus, as usual, talking to some friends, when out of the corner of my eye, I see Kirito in his infamous cloak, walking towards me and my friends with about 5 other members of the anime club. At the time, the police were present at school, so I wasn't too worried about him until he stood about a foot away from me and my friends, holding a metallic green butterfly knife. At this point, I knew things were serious. Keep in mind that there are hundreds of kids near us, and me and my friends are really the only ones aware of what's going on. Everybody's in their own little worlds, you know? Staring at him, Kirito slowly walks towards us, holding the butterfly knife low so that it isn't seen, telling me that he knew how I snitched to the police and that he wasn't afraid to deal with me or the other members. I'd lie if I said that I wasn't afraid because I had never been in a position like this before, but I tried to remain calm and simply kept telling him to please put the knife down and let this whole thing go. Instead, Kirito proceeded to swing the knife around, telling me how I had ruined his life and had become the worst possible thing that he had ever met, as he called me derogatory names. This kept going for a while, with all of us on edge, until sure enough, Kirito, swinging the knife around, manages to cut himself. It's so high tension, and then he cuts himself. It's like, oh, anticlimax. It's too funny, bro. Hey, I'd like to interrupt and say, if you're not subscribed yet, maybe think about it. Maybe share the video around. Thanks so much. Now back to the story. This wasn't a small little cut. When I say cut, I mean cut, as in blood gushing from his hand as he dropped the knife, and the nearby kids began to take notice, screaming and yelling, "Blood!" causing the cops to come rushing in. Seeing a kid bleeding profusely from his hand and a knife on the floor, police knew that something had happened and told us all to stay where we are. When out of nowhere, the neckbeards that came along with Kirito began to scream about how I was the one that cut him, causing a commotion of screaming and accusations being leveled back and forth. Is this really the best use of our law enforcement resources? Unsure of what the real story is, the police tell us that Kirito and I will be detained until they figure out what happened, meaning that we would both get cuffed, but not arrested, and taken to the police department where we would be interrogated. I know better than to resist the police, so I put my hands behind my back as I was instructed and began walking when the officer stopped, as Kirito started screaming and thrashing on the floor, dirt in his hair and blood all over his clothes, as the officer struggled to get the cuffs on him. I was put into a police car, but Kirito was taken on an ambulance, which was called to treat his wounds, and we left to the police station. We were there for about 5 hours. I was interrogated and got released to my parents after various testimonies from my friends and other people present managed to clear up this little incident. So, since I was simply detained and proven innocent, I was let go with no charges or records on my name, but for Kirito, that was the last time that I saw or heard of him until later on that year. Fast forward to my final year of high school, and boy, how things had changed. The anime club had been disbanded completely, and the neckbeards associated with Kirito had been suspended for the rest of the year, having to go to remedial summer classes in an attempt to graduate. The incident became famous around the school and even made it to the local news. However, this was not the end of the Kirito saga. I'll be truthful and admit that this incident happened without much notice and evidence, but at the time I had enough incentive to believe, and still do, that Kirito was responsible for this incident. What's the incident? Nearing the end of my high school career, the incident with the anime club had been mostly forgotten, and everyone carried on with their usual routines until another incident popped into existence. Can you stop saying incident, please? Later, one day after coming home from school, One of my friends sent a message to the group chat that we all had of a mysterious Snapchat posted earlier today claiming,
Tomorrow it all ends. I'll kill every single one of you. No one will be spared.
and the picture of a gun. The account was deleted right after, and enough people had seen that Snapchat to notify the police. Needless to say, no one showed up to school the day after, as it had become infested with police and classes canceled due to the threat of a school shooter. Well, you know, back in my day, it used to be a simple bomb threat, but I guess the times, they do change. The true identity of the threatener was never released, but the few people that were lucky enough to see it in person said the account belonged to a, quote, weird kid who always caused trouble and wore a, quote, weird coat. I won't say that this was Kirito, but the evidence and incentive was present enough to assume he was never arrested and simply was expelled after the bus stop incident. This is the end of the story, and I thank you guys for sticking through. I just want to leave off on a note that although my experiences with these types of guys weren't pleasant, I don't condone any type of violence against them. I don't know why this kid was so angry or what led him to his actions, but sometimes these guys just need to be heard out or simply left alone. Anyways, this has been my story, and boy, was it a ride until the end. Thanks for reading. It did get a little mishmashed up there. It seems like OP lost the plot, but I don't know. The moral is nice enough, okay? Kirito, well, he just sort of fell in with the bad crowd, you know? Or maybe he just had some, like, devil seed inside of him the entire time. And like I said, he spoiled the whole bunch. Now, nobody gets an anime club. How do you like that? I mean, makes no difference to me, but they're probably pretty sad. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, friends. Like, comment, subscribe, follow me on all the things. I appreciate you. Supporters out there, yes, I love them. Always remember, friends, that you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, friends, bye-bye.